Welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Shively, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and I'm on a 1 million pound mission. I've personally lost over 100 pounds. I've helped my hometown lose over 35,000 pounds, and now I'm on a mission to produce over 1 million pounds of results by helping you gain clarity about what you need to do to reach your goals and give you the confidence to take action. And my friends, the perfect time to start taking action is now. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy, Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude. And this is episode number 197, Unlocking the Amazing Power of NLP with Matt Brauning. Now, before we dive into this one, I just wanted to welcome you to the year 2019. I'm fired up. I'm excited for this year. Lots of big things planned. One of my big goals for 2019 is to actually connect with as many of you as possible. And one of the ways I'm doing that, I've put up a bunch of free 15-minute coaching sessions on my calendar. You can access that calendar through a link that is in the show notes. So just click on the show notes with this episode and snag one of those spots for yourself. I'd love to connect with you, talk about your 2019 goals, talk about your top transformation danger zones that you want to smash and solve this year, and finally get you to the other side where you're achieving the results that you really want to go after. So this is no strings attached. It's free. It's not a sales call. It's just me wanting to connect with you. I appreciate my podcast audience so much. I just really enjoy picking your brain. You might ask me a few questions, but I'll probably ask you twice as many about how to get more out of the show, how to be a better coach, things like that. So it'll be a dual purpose connection point. Don't worry about that. So I'm really fired up to connect with you guys. So I'd love for you to click that link in the show notes. Let's schedule a call. It's a video chat so we can see each other and connect eye to eye and see if we can get something done. So speaking of getting something done, have you guys ever felt like the hardest part of your whole dang transformation journey is just dealing with that conversation that's going on inside of your own head? All right, raise your hand. Yeah, me too. So that's why I'm so pumped about introducing my main man, Matt Brauning, with this week's episode. Now, as an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and master trainer of NLP, Matt is a leader in the field of business development and human potential. He's spoken and taught all over the world on the subjects of leadership, communication, and presentation skills. But with this episode, we dive into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And this is a topic that I've been fascinated with ever since I started reading Tony Robbins stuff. Tony Robbins is big on NLP. And this is just a unique way to use our brain and program our brain for good and not evil. We get inside of our own head and we beat ourselves up. That little voice inside of our head really distracts us from achieving our goals a lot of times. And Matt has specific techniques that we can use to rewire that. So we use our thoughts and our brain to our advantage. And this is, I'm telling you, it's fascinating. Like, he had me doing things inside the interview that I've taken since and started implementing them, and they work. So it's really, really cool. Now, in this interview, we talk about how he found NLP and how it changed his life. We talk about developing triggers to create a positive mental state. That's one of the key takeaways that I had for sure. We talk about using NLP to combat some of the toughest transformation danger zones. And then we finish up with the first step you need to take to start using NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, to flip that mental switch and start seeing some positive momentum. This one is high value. Somebody that I mention from time to time that I really enjoy is a guy named Brendon Burchard. And Matt Brauning, he looks like Brendon Burchard, but he reminds me of Brendon's energy and just he's got that mojo. He's a great coach. He's a great teacher, and he's so passionate about helping others. You're going to love this interview. So without further delay, here's episode number 197, Unlocking the Amazing Power of NLP with Matt Brauning. All right, Matt, welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. How are you doing today, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing awesome. Getting ready for Thanksgiving as we record this, and I'm just blessed to be here. Thanks, Adam.
Well, you're somebody that I've been psyched to connect with. We met several months back at the New Media Summit, and I heard your story. I just felt your passion, your energy, and I was like, this guy is a home run for my show. It needs to happen. And finally, we're making it happen. You've got a ton of great things going on. You're putting a lot of great info and energy out there. And I'm just pumped to plug you in to the Million Pound Mission and introduce you to my audience.
Well, let me say the exact same thing too, because when I saw you, I'm like, dude, this guy, to meet someone on mission and like really, really on purpose, like you're doing, it's just, you don't see that all the time. And you're passionate and you're excited and you're just crushing it, helping people transform. And I just think that's so cool. So anything I can help with the mindset wise or anything else, I'm in for. And let's talk it up, dude.
Yeah. So I'm really psyched to pick your brain on NLP. And NLP is something that I'm fascinated about because I'm a big Tony Robbins fan. He talks about NLP. And so that has always sparked my interest. I've never been able to go deep dive and get an expert cornered like I'm going to have you for the next 45 to 60 minutes. So I want to plug into that because I feel like that is a tool that so many of my audience members can use to benefit themselves and get better results, not only with their health, but just with their life in general. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could start off just by defining what NLP is and then how you found it and started using it.
What a great question. So there's probably at this point, there's as many definitions of NLP as there are people using it. But I'll give you a couple of my faves.
Okay.
So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. So neuros meaning to stand for the mind or the nervous system, and then linguistic would be for the language. So one of the simplest definitions is how to leverage the language of the mind to get your desired results. So the idea, though, is that the mind has its own language. So when you and I talk, we only use words, right? That's pretty much it. And maybe, hey, hands and some facial expressions, yeah. But we use words. And words are very limited, right? They're very, very limited. So if I said, Adam, I had fun with you, and you said, I had fun too. Well, the picture in my mind and the picture in your mind could be drastically different things. Right? What was the fun birthday party? So the language of the mind is so much deeper. At least 100 times deeper and more robust. We're using pictures and sounds and feelings and smells and tastes and having an entire sensory experience of something. So the one definition is how to use the language of the mind to get your desired results. Another really easy definition would be the lost user manual for the brain. How many times have you heard someone say, the kids don't come with a user manual? Well, neither does our mind. And as we record this, is 2018, and we're still trying to figure things out. And we're still, 50 years ago, we thought that the mind was segmented in these different things. And it's every year we learn more about our mind, our DNA, and so forth. So NLP is really that study of how does this thing work subjectively? And that's the last one I'll give you, and then we'll move on. It's the study of subjective experience. So why, here's a great example to exemplify that. So do you love oysters or hate oysters, or could you take them or leave them?
I'm middle of the road on oysters.
You're the middle of the road guy, right? So I am too. Some people, though, you ask them and they love them. They love them. The aphrodisiac, all that. Some people, they have an oyster and they hate it. It's like the snot of the sea. So the question is, what makes one love or hate them? It's the same oyster. They're the same taste. We have the seven basic tastes, all of us in our tongues. But the subjective experience, the experience subject to the observer, I have an interaction with oysters and I love them. You haven't and you hate them. What makes that difference? NLP studies that difference. So it goes into every area in life, desires, passions, motivation, decision-making, speaking, confidence, willpower. I'm sure with Million Pound Message, the Million Pound Mission, we'll get into, the willpower side and choices and whatnot. So we study people's choices and we study why one person makes one choice, one person makes the other, and then ultimately how to take back control of that. How to harness your own will back and how to harness your mind back and make your own choices on purpose.
So how did you come to find it? And how did you, let's start there because I'm sure there's a good story. There has to be a good story about this. So let's just talk about your first experience discovering NLP.
I'm 22 years old and I'm working for a mortgage broker, and a Tony Robbins guy came into our office and my boss bought tickets for everyone to go.
Nice. And
I watched Tony, man, same as you. I watched him on stage, and he was working with this lady who was depressed. And 5 minutes later, she wasn't depressed. He was interrupting that pattern and helping her to shift the neurological pathway of what she was doing. And I was fascinated. I'd never seen that before in my life. Yeah. I never at 22, I never asked, why do I do what I do? How do we become who we become? It was nowadays personal growth, you can get it in the gum, the candy store. But then I don't know. I've never ran into that before. So I was fascinated. And then I went and I started my own business and pretty successful. And by 25, I was a self-made millionaire. I had $5 million in property. I was crushing it in the finance world, or the money world. But very quickly I figured out it was empty. I wasn't contributing at a deep level. And I don't know, I had this yearning at 25 years old to contribute at a deeper level. So I decided I'm going to do what Tony does. I'm going to start my first seminar. And I did. Big success. There were 6 people there. 2 of them were my parents. That was cool.
Yes.
Yes. And, God bless my mom and dad for showing up to support me. But, they didn't buy. You know what I'm saying? They didn't invest. But it was like it took a couple of years of really pushing and doing that. But I thought, if Tony started off doing neuro-linguistic programming, that's where I'm going to go. So I did all the certifications I could. I took all the seminars and trainings. And, 2 years in, long story short, I finally had the breakout of a lifetime in Australia. And I went and spoke in 2008 to 400 people. And somehow mind blown. I got my message across that you can take back control of your life. And it was a financial seminar. So it was all about mindset, right? And people invested and they wanted to do my trainings and courses. And, that was 10, almost 12 years ago, give it however you map that out. But I started 12 years ago. 10 years ago, I finally broke out. And now at this point, I've ran, 250 multi-day workshops in 18 cities and 4 countries around the world. Now, top ranked podcast. And things are just taking off. The message goes on TV. I'm on radio all the time. It's insane. But the point is, I got into it because I watched someone's life change. And when I watched someone's life change, I said, I got to do that. Like, I have to do that, and nothing else matters. And ever since then, I decided whether I'm broke or whether I'm rich, I don't care. I'm going to do this work. And I believe the very reason why I've been able to succeed, and I'm sure you have a similar story, the reason why the message and the mission actually succeeds is because we're willing to do it no matter what. I'm willing to do it because I don't care if I achieve or not. I need to do this for someone. And when you have that inside, the success outside ends up coming. That's my belief, at least.
Yeah, I think that's why we're kind of kindred spirits, where we both have that message and that mission inside of us. And we know, like, it's not like I might be able to help people. Like, we know without a shadow of a doubt, we can help people. And then it's just getting out there and actually connecting with people and doing the work. So I feel like that's what we got that vibe. Now, I want you to tell me a couple of stories about just some really cool NLP examples of people that you've worked with, people that you've seen. But I just want to give the audience a feel for how the process kind of works and how you see that change happen, whether it's in 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 weeks. Let's talk about some examples.
Usually 5 minutes, 5 to 10. Some people unfairly compare NLP to therapeutic intervention, and because we'll work on similar things sometimes. So I do everything from executive coaching to take some of the best in the world. I've coached John McAfee, who founded McAfee Antivirus, sold it for $100 million, and helped him long ago when I was first starting. And so there's that side of the world, but some of my favorite ones are the phobias. NLP has gotten kind of a good rap on this, where if you look at the psychiatric manual, the DSM-4 or 5 right now, it'll say roughly it takes 15 years to cure a phobia. 15 years. Now, that's a lot of therapy. And one of the reasons is there's I don't want to pigeonhole, and I'm certainly not judging people in the therapy world, but so I'm going to generalize it right now. A lot of therapy relies on what Freud first created, really in the 1800s, which is super archaic. It's conversational or cognitive therapy. One day I just look at you and say, well, tell me what you think. How does it make you feel? What does your dream think? Tell me how you feel about your mom, all that kind of stuff. And as interesting as the answers are, what we've found lately, especially in the NLP field, is that the answers of why don't change the how. So knowing why you're scared of heights because someone tricked you when you were 4 years old and your older brother held you by the roof or whatever, that the why doesn't help you change the how. Still, when you get near heights, you still start freaking out. So for years, one of the things I would do when I do the workshops in Australia is they have this thing called the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and you can do the bridge climb. So that's pretty fun. You harness up and then you actually climb and walk up the steps on the outside of this metal bridge and get to the top and then throw your hands in the air and say, look at me. Well, everyone loves doing that except for people who are terrified of heights.
Right.
So wherever I would go, whenever I do a seminar, I always at some point pull someone from the audience and say, who has a phobia? And I'm looking for the worst phobic. And I've done so many different people. So I've helped with needle phobias, caterpillar phobias, cockroaches, baby butterflies,
Yeah.
caterpillars, heights, deep water, turkeys, pigeons, magpies, all different kinds of birds, claustrophobia, triskaidekaphobia, the fear of the number 13, agoraphobia, like snakes many, many times, spiders many, many times, like you name it. It doesn't matter what it is. And here's what I found is the why doesn't matter. That's the point, because how each human does a phobic reaction is the same. Every human does a phobic reaction exactly the same. We get a data point. We get an image in our mind of something that happened. And then that triggers our brain to create a response that keeps us safe. Good for us, right? Good for us, keeps us safe. One man, this is just recently, a few months ago, I was doing a one-day seminar in Los Angeles called Unlock Success, and he was 72 years old. I might be getting the exact number, but he was in his early 70s. And he had a needle phobia since he was 5. So about a 65-year phobia. And I'm talking so phobic that if you got a needle, he would freak out, he would turn red, he might faint, all different, like really bad reactions. And I said, what kind of pain does this cause you? And he said, I haven't been to the doctor in a long time. And the reality is I should go, and I know I need to get checked, but I just don't want to go, and I don't go. And his family was there with him, and they said, yep, that's right. So I brought him up on stage and did the phobia demo. So all we're doing is really scrambling, not the why, but the process, the how. How do you do it? How do you react with fear to something that happened 65 years ago? Well, you get the image in your brain and you run the movie. And then when the movie comes to the end, you loop back and start it again. How the brain works is every time you loop back on a memory and start it again, it gets a little bit more intense. So a phobic has been doing that for years, and it gets more and more intense every time. And pretty soon the memory is worse than the actual experience, right? Follow me on that?
Yep.
So what we do in NLP, because people think this is crazy, there's no way it can work. The reason why it works in 5 to 10 minutes is because all we're doing is accessing the original memory, and then it's like a film. We cut the film, so now there's an exit. Instead of looping over and over again, it stops at the end and it exits. And then we go through and scramble the film. It's sort of like, remember those old archaic devices, the compact discs? You remember those things?
Yes.
Way back in the day.
Back in the day.
Yeah. So like if you took a CD and you scratched it, the laser engraving pattern on it, just like the phobia, would skip. But if you scratched it with a push pin over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, it wouldn't play again. And if you do that with a phobic memory that was already made up and it was already so old in the first place, they can't play it anymore. So a few minutes later, I brought this guy up, and someone actually in the audience, I never had this before, someone had a real needle. There was a nurse, and she had diabetic needles. They were all sealed, and what's the word I'm looking for? They were safe.
Yeah, like sterilized and safe.
Sterilized, right? It was brand new needle seal. I always say that just in case someone's like, you did what? So she said, you want to use this one? I said, sure. So I pull up this, closed diabetic needle, and I break the seal, open it up, and show him the needle right next to him, about a foot away. And I said, what do you think about needles? And I did this after the fact, and he just looked at it curiously. Whereas 10 minutes ago, he was starting to go white. I said, and I held the needle, and I put it right on his arm. And he just looked at it and said, I guess it's just a needle. And the whole audience, 150 people, were like freaking out, going, what just happened? Because they all watched him turn ghost white like a sheet and then turn beet red and start to shake a little bit when I even talked about needles. And now he's got a needle sticking in his skin, and he has no reaction whatsoever. So he freaks out. His daughter freaks out. Love so much.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Yeah, that's the type of stuff that you hear these stories, and I'm always curious about the how. So it's really interesting that, like, that CD scratching example. That's a good visual, I think, that people can kind of take home. So. Well, I warned you before we start recording that I wanted to throw a few scenarios out there because I love giving my audience just action steps and tips that they can just take and directly apply. And I get a similar type of question, we go down a certain vein a lot of times with people that email in. So I want to toss a few of these situations your direction, how you would attack it in general with NLP, just get some of the the wise sage advice from your direction. All right, you still up for
sage.
this? All right,
let's go sage.
Sage mode, engage. All right, Matt. So I deal with a lot of people that have tried the weight loss thing before, and they've seen some results, but then they backslide, they regain weight, and it seems like they're just really, really afraid of failing again, so they take no more action. So they know they need to lose weight, they want to lose weight, but they are just afraid of failure because they've tasted success, and they have that what I would define as weight gain guilt. They beat themselves up. They've lost weight, they regain it, and now they're beating themselves up about it. So how can we use NLP, or how can we kind of get inside of our head to get out of our head about this situation?
The direction to go first, if we chunked up and we went a little more vague and said someone is wanting to lose weight, but they're not, or they're gaining it back.
Right.
There's a couple of possible causes. The one you brought out would be like what I would call a gestalt, which is a fear cause. So a gestalt is simply like it's a stacking of events or a stacking of emotions. A stacking of events that are similar emotions. So if I had, guilt is the one you talked about, and that's the biggest one for sure. I saw that, years ago. I used to go to 12-step meetings for 7 years, early from 17 to like 24 years old, and I went through and worked the steps. And what I saw so often is when someone would backslide, and whether it was a cigarette or it was a drug or a drink, what happened is they could be sober for years. Or in your case, right, they would be on a great diet, a great fitness plan for years, and then they backslide, and then they feel shame or they feel guilt. And what I found is what's one of the best ways to punish, because guilt has to be punished. That's one of the beliefs we have in human nature. If you go down, like I'm also a Christian pastor, so if you go down and the faith background and look at the whole story, right, whether you believe it or not, you look at the story of Jesus, that whole story is about we have messed up and we should be guilty and something has to pay the price. So instead of beating yourself up, he did it for us. That's that's the story.
Right.
So it's in human nature is the point that everyone has this feeling of if something has gone wrong, something has to pay the price. So I have to punish whoever's in charge. And I'm the one in charge of my weight, so I got to punish me. So what's the best way to punish myself if I feel guilt and shame for backsliding? To screw myself up more. I see with smokers all the time. I smoked a cigarette. Oh, I'm the worst. I'm such a POS. What am I doing? And because I'm such a bad person, I messed up again. And I'm not. And we say all these terrible things to ourselves. If I really want to feel bad, what's the best way? I punish myself by doing it more. And that's part of the addictive process. The first book I wrote actually 12 years ago was called Total Freedom from Addictions. And it was exactly about that because junk food can be an addictive behavior. Yep. Going back into lazy patterns or procrastination or sleeping in instead of going to the gym anymore. All of that can be construed as an addictive behavior. So the first thing is you got to let go of the guilt. Now, easier said than done sometimes. Right. So some people, you just say that and they go, oh, you're right. But if it's a little more than that for you, what I would suggest is there's many places you can find this, but there's something called time dynamics. It's an element or a branch of NLP. And I teach it at our live seminars, and I have some programs around that. So, hit me on social media, and I'll give you some resources. Happy to do that. But time dynamics is a way that you sort of go back into a memory, and it's like real stuff. It's not just woo-woo like in your brain, because where do memories live in the first place? Memories live in our brain.
Right.
They only exist in our mind. So Albert Einstein said, all your problems are problems of your imagination. Therefore, all your solutions are solutions of your imagination. See, he was a very smart guy. He knew the right thing. He knew that all of our problems, it's not the overeating, it's the guilt of overeating that causes us to do it more. If you let go of the guilt, all of a sudden you have no problem just turning around instantly and doing the right thing again, right? So in time dynamics, it would take the rest of the interview just to explain how the whole thing works. But I want to encourage you and inspire you to check it out because it's a process that is content free, meaning there's no why, there's no storyline, there's no who did what to me, where, when, and how old was I. You don't need any of that. But you can go back and find the initial guilt memory that would start stacking more and more guilt every time you screw something up. That's the idea. And then you scramble that memory And what it does is sort of like a deck of cards. It's like pulling the bottom card out, and the whole thing just kind of collapses because it's all built on itself. So when you do, and that's how our emotions tend to work. So when you get rid of the root cause emotion, or you scramble that, every other reference point for every other time you felt guilty about messing something up, it all sort of collapses itself and doesn't work anymore. So time dynamics is the best way to help get rid of the guilt or the shame or the fear of doing something wrong. And then there's always other causes as well that we could, get into, or if there's other examples we want to attack with. But check out time dynamics and ask yourself, when was the first time I ever felt this type of guilt for messing up? And then we want to go in and scramble that memory.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I totally can visualize the stacking of the cards. Like that, I see this happening. I'm sure you do too when you coach people. It's just the more we get inside of our head, the more that replay happens. Like you said, it gets worse and worse and more intense, and we beat ourselves up more and more. You see that a lot with people that this time of year, they've done well all 9 months of the year, and then the holiday season hits, and they're like, "Oh, I always struggle during the holiday season," or I always, they have this roadblock, whether it's the holiday season or maybe it's tax season or something, it always happens.
Stress season.
Yeah. So do you have any advice or mindset tips around that when we always have this natural block that just always hits and then it seems to always screw us up? I call them transformation danger zones. It's like, I use an analogy called the black hole of fitness doom, where we gain initial. I'm epic with my names. I'm epic with my names. So we gain initial momentum. We start something new. We get that momentum going, and then life happens. We're not ready for it, and then we crash and burn and go back to where we started, and just around and around. Every time it gets harder, just for the exact reason that you described. So how do we get mentally rewired? How do we use NLP? How do we change things if we always have that same block? And it's frustrating because we know that it always messes us up. So what can we do mentally to change that situation?
There's a technique called anchoring in NLP. And I don't know if you might be familiar with it or not. It's become pretty popular as an idea. It initially started off with Ivan Pavlov from 1904. And most people are familiar with Ivan Pavlov and his dogs, when he rang the tuning fork and he showed meat paste to the dogs, and the dogs salivated. He did that over and over again because he was experimenting. He was trying to figure out, why do the dogs salivate even though they don't have the meat in their mouth yet? Because at that time, they knew that salivation was about digestion. It helped with enzymes. They didn't know enzymes, but they knew that it helped with digestion. So he was figuring out, why would I just show them the meat and they would still salivate? It doesn't make sense. And today we know that, right? You'd open a can opener and the cat comes running, and you show the food and the dog's drool, but they didn't know it at the time. So he wrote a paper called The Conditioned Response. And the idea was that you can trade stimulus. So he went from a gustatory, a taste stimulus, to a visual stimulus showing the tuning fork. And then he hit the tuning fork and just hit it by himself. And then he went from a visual to an auditory system. So the concept is, you can change your stimulus, but the stimulus itself, the sound or the sight or whatever it is, can stimulate and connect and can have a conditioned response of your state. So the state you get into, the idea is this, the definition would be, if you have an intense state and you connect it with a unique stimulus, and the two get fired off over and over again, they will be linked together neurologically. That's the idea. So you talk about holidays, and whether it's stress or whether it's, all that good food, or it's the lazy times, or I live in Michigan now. I moved to Grand Rapids a few months ago. So, holidays are also, it's freezing cold. And it gets dark and the sun goes away and the snow's up to my, above my basement, and people get in this hibernation kind of mode where now I'm going to eat whatever I want. And then springtime comes, life thaws, and it's time to get back out. So if winter has you anchored, right, the stimulus of now it's darker, or now it's colder, or now it's Thanksgiving, or now it's tax time, think of that as one of the stimulus, right? You get a picture in your mind of, oh boy, it's tax time. You feel stress. The stress automatically triggers, what do I do about that? How do I feel? Well, if I feel stressed and my only coping mechanism for stress is to eat or to be lazy or to be good to myself, and good to myself in this case means sitting on the couch with a bag of chips and staying up all night or sleeping in, because that's not good to yourself. And we know that.
Yep.
But it's the anchor, right? So again, there are techniques. One of them is called collapsing anchors, where essentially you get together with an NLP practitioner, or we do this, in our seminars, and we'll take one of your states. So what's the one state that you might see your clients drop into that's negative? What would you call that, do you think, when they're not on track?
I just tend to describe it as we get in our head and we start beating ourselves up. So it's the whole black hole fitness doom thing.
When they're doing that, how do they feel?
They're frustrated, and a lot of times they start projecting and they start blaming, and they're not in a state where they can really accept responsibility.
Right. So they're feeling at the effect.
Yeah.
And then when you're at the effect, you're blaming people. Like, how does that feel inside? What's the emotion?
That's when they know better. That's the thing, is they get frustrated and they tend to think, I should be able to do this on my own by now. Like they just get in the cycle of, why do I need somebody else's help? This always happens, this thing, I know it's there. Why can't I do this on my own? And then instead of kind of accepting that and just, it's ego. They're not willing to let go of that ego situation where they step up and go, actually, I do need help. I do need a coach right now, or I do need to plug into something that's worked in the past. So I feel like that frustration cycle really centers around that.
So and that's what I hear kind of 3 times. You said frustration.
Yep.
So the problem is when someone gets in a frustration mode and there's no exit, there's no way to, like, what do you do next? Well, most people, they get frustrated and then they stay frustrated, and we all have a coping mechanism for frustration. Some people, it's giving up. Some people, it's breaking through, right? Frustration can be a great emotion, because frustration is the thing when you're trying to bang through a wall and you're banging your head over and over again, and you get so frustrated that finally one day you're like, you know what? I'm doing this. I'm so frustrated. Frustration can cause momentum. It can cause movement. But if frustration doesn't have fruit, if they keep banging their head against the wall and they're frustrated, the next step, some people exit frustration by giving up and getting depressed or being apathetic. And they go, well, you know what? I was frustrated. It didn't work. So now forget it. I'm giving up. So the question is, do you go from frustration to apathy, or do you go from frustration to motivation? And how do you change that? Because as I explain that, I'm sure you're thinking, yeah, like going from frustration to motivation is way better. And I know you've seen people do that, right?
Yep.
The people that start a brand new fitness regimen. So often I used to, in Orange County when I lived there, I went to one of the, not a CrossFit, but it was like a circuit training gym.
Yep.
Right. So very like group dynamic, and everyone's getting healthier and flexible and more fit. And I saw every time when someone got there, they usually got there out of frustration. But because they had the support system and the coaching, and they had someone in their corner, and they had this trainer going, come on, like wherever you are, you can do this. You don't have to live that way. They went from frustration, and the next emotion was motivation, right? So the frustration got them to the gym, and the motivation and the excitement kept them at the gym. But if someone gets in frustration, they don't do anything about it, then it'll turn into something different. If they're frustrated at home by themselves, and that's exactly to your point, having accountability around you, having support around you, having mentorship, whatever you want to call it. But I just call it encouragement, man. Having someone in your corner that is your guy or your gal that says you can do this, it's so key. And you move from frustration to motivation. So if you don't do that naturally, is the point. In NLP, there's a lot of different techniques we can use, and one of them is anchoring. So you can do this. Everyone can actually try this out. If you're not driving right now listening to this, you could try this out. Or you can pull over safely, however you need to, or pause. I guess it's a podcast. So you can take like your thumb and your index finger, and you could use this as your new trigger you use. Okay, so I'll show you if it's on a video, but if it's audio, I'll just explain it. So you use your finger and your thumb as a trigger. And what you do is just simply close your eyes and remember a time when you were really, really, really frustrated with something, but you did something about it. Not frustration like depressed. Don't go to the wrong memory. Go to a time that you felt so frustrated and then you figured it out. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could have been 3rd grade and you're doing a math problem and you're like, oh, I don't get it. But go to a time that you remember finally getting it. That's the key, right? You couldn't spell a word and then you finally remembered it. You were 5 years old, you couldn't tie your shoes, and finally you got it. Because all of us probably as adults can tie our shoes. In fact, we're probably pretty confident about tying our shoes. You probably at some point, though, were so frustrated not getting it. And if you remember that moment in time, so go back. This is really important. Go back to the frustration when you couldn't get it, and then you finally broke through. And that feeling of breaking through, of figuring it out, of going, I got it. Go right back to that time, float down in your own body, look through your own eyes, see what you were seeing, hear the sounds, and really feel the feelings of that breakthrough and the momentum out of frustration. And the moment you feel that, breathe that in your body, breathe it in like you were living it right here, right now. Make the face, your facial expression as you're breaking through right now. Because this is real, because it's a real memory. Right as you're in that moment, you squeeze your finger and your thumb together. And then maybe say something unique like, I got this, or let's go, or yes, whatever it is, say something. And then go right back into your memory again. And then when you do it, you squeeze your fingers together for a couple of seconds and then let it go. Right when you get to the peak of that emotion, that motivated feeling. And it'll take a few times to try this to really get the timing down. But the timing is important of when you put your finger together. As you feel the feeling coming in, you squeeze your finger and thumb and you hold it. And then when you feel it peaking, like you really feel it. And I know some of us are bigger emoters than others, and some of us are really in our head. Wherever you are, you do your version of an emotion. Everyone can do this. And then when it peaks, you let it go. And what happens is emotions, like old states that we remember, they come in like waves. They come in, they crest and they peak, and then they sort of go back down again. That's natural, right? You're not motivated every second of every day. Can you imagine how dumb you would look? You're like, yeah.
Although
and you
I
never
had to
stop.
say, when I first met you, you were kind of like that, Matt. I mean, I'm like, this guy switched on, and he switched on hard, and he's very energetic. So I'm just saying. Go ahead.
Thank you. But even when you meet someone switched on, like there's this moment of it starts to go back down, and you have normal, and then you can kind of get excited again. So watch your emotional states like waves of the ocean. They come up, they peak, and they kind of go back down, and they'll come back up again. So then I would, go back and let's do this a second time, do it a third time. And if like you're listening right now going, okay, you probably don't feel breakthrough motivation right now because we're just talking about it. So go right back in your memory again. Let's do it a second time real quick before you pull back on the freeway. Do it a second time. Close your eyes, go back to another time when you had this, you felt so frustrated, but you did break through. Maybe you could have been in a fight. That's another example. So you can go into examples that aren't the example you're wanting to use today. So if you want to break through your frustration into motivation and action in fitness, you can go back to a time in a relationship. Maybe you're having a fight with someone you love dearly, and you're like, they're not hearing me, and I'm not hearing them, and we're missing, and and you felt, have you ever done that before? I have. You felt frustrated. But then finally, like towards the end, you're like, I get it. Or they're like, I get it. I love you. Like, I love you too. Like, yes, we're just trying to love each other, but we suck at it sometimes. It's okay. But you broke through, and now you're back to that, like, yes, let's be together. Let's figure that out. Maybe that's a memory you could use, whatever it is. But go back to that, float down in your body, look through your own eyes, see what you saw, hear what you heard, feel the feeling. And when you're there, squeeze your finger together, say, I got this, or yes, or whatever it is. And you do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times on the same finger and thumb, and you stack that same emotion, more intense, more intense, more intense. And here's why the whole thing matters. And I'll end with this one. Once you've done that, and now you have a new anchor. It's the same thing as when you're driving down the road and you hear a song that takes you back, and all of a sudden you're breaking up or falling in love, or you smell Old Spice and you're back sitting on your grandpa's lap and you're 4 years old, right? That's an anchor. It's the feeling of like trust and love or whatever connected with the stimulus of the Old Spice. You're doing this on purpose with your thumb and your finger. This is the Old Spice. This is the stimulus, but you're creating it on purpose. Now, the next time, let's just say you had a donut, or you slept in and you didn't go to the gym at 6 a.m. like you said you would every day for the rest of your life, and you made a mistake. Instead of feeling frustrated like, I can never do this, you get up and at 7 o'clock and you squeeze your finger, you say, I got this. And you'll feel the frustration that led to motivation and breakthrough start to come up. And that's when you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go anyway. And you just do it. And you know what? I didn't plan on doing this, but since we talked about it, Adam, would it be okay? I don't know if you have like in show notes or something. I don't have an opt-in or a sales thing for this or anything, but I would just give a gift to anyone. Yeah. I have something called Unleash Your Inner Champion. And it's an audio program of me literally taking you through this process so you can create what I call this a champion state. And you can use this to create a champion state, any kind of champion state. You can feel courageous, powerful, unstoppable, or joyful, present, and loving. You could use that with family. You could use it with anything you want. But I'd be happy to, we sell them for $4.97, but I'd be happy to just give you a link, and you can give the file to anyone you want that listens to your podcast, and they can use this NLP technique. If that's cool with you, I'd love to give it as a gift.
That's amazing. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, we'll hook that up in the show notes for everybody, and I'll put it in the blog link as well. So that is awesome. I'm fascinated about this. Like, this is exactly what I was hoping we would get out of this. So a couple of quick just clarification questions, because I know I'll get these types of questions. So in that moment when we're feeling, so we have a moment of frustration, are you saying that we can use that as just kind of a barrier to change our state? And so that's when you would do that?
It would be a reset. So
yeah, like a reset. Okay.
Yeah. So quick clarification. So two things. When you first set it up, you want to set it up when you're not feeling frustrated. You should be feeling neutral.
Right. Okay.
Like, we're just hanging out right now. You're just, doing whatever you're doing. And then you're going to use, whether you use my program or you just rewind and listen. I did it a couple of times. You'll go back in your memory, find a memory, go back to that time when you felt frustration that led to breakthrough. And then you set it. And then you do it again and again. And once you've set it from a neutral place to get excited or get motivated or get breakthrough, then now the anchor is set. The second time now is later on in life, maybe the next day, the next week. If you're feeling frustrated and then you feel like you're getting stuck because of it, then you just go, you know what? You fire it off and you say, I got this. And you'll feel in your body the emotion rising up. Now, it might not be as intense as the moment when you really felt it, because you're bringing it back up, but it still will be that thing. Just like when you hear that song, all of a sudden, if I hear Tim McGraw, Don't Take the Girl, to this day, I mean, it's been like 25 years, but if I hear it today, I'll still kind of tear up for a second. Like, it just has this anchor in me for some reason. I'm like, it's so sad. And I'm not going to cry fully and bawl like a baby like I did when I was, 20. But I'm going to feel just like that tearing up feeling inside. That makes sense? So it's the same emotion, but it might be less intense. But the more you do it, the more you set it over and over again, the more intense it'll become. So when you feel frustrated, that's when you fire it off.
All right. So I'm big on affirmations. I talk about it all the time. Like, I created something I call my lifestyle rehabilitation statement, and I read it every morning. I try to feel it, and I say it out loud, and I say it with emotion. I write it as if it's already happened. I'm in on all that stuff. So can we use this anchoring in that process as well? So if I'm doing morning affirmations, can I add this in there just to keep that anchor as strong as possible? Or how would you do that?
Heck yes, I would.
Okay.
Heck yes, I would. Yeah. So affirmations, so I love them, but I hate them. I love them because they're so great, right? Like, I'd much rather affirm a positive belief statement than a negative one. Like, if we don't think about it, we all have negative affirmations, right? When something goes wrong, you go, oh, yeah, there it goes again. Or, yeah, I never get this. So we all do that without thinking about it. So I love affirmations because you're consciously, intentionally changing belief systems and affirming it over and over again. The problem is how a lot of people do affirmations is they read it and they go, I think I can, or whatever they say, right? You're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you.
Yeah.
If you're a kid of the 80s or 90s with Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live, go YouTube him. And I'll bet you do this differently probably, but what I love is, like, Tony Robbins teaches incantations, which is the idea, it's this metaphor of having a full body affirmation. And I love it. So you're engaging your physiology, you're engaging your face, your breathing, your tone. You don't just say, okay, I got this. I am a powerful being. You say, I am a powerful being, or, whatever you say, you use everything you can. And certainly one of the most powerful ways to do that is if you have an anchor set, or heck, you don't even have to do the process I took you through. You could, if you're really doing a full-on incantation affirmation, and look, if you're first trying this out, it feels silly. So don't do it in front of people. Do it locked in your room all by yourself, no mirrors, turn off the lights, whatever you got to do. But you say it, you breathe it, you move your body. You're like, yes, you smack your fist to your hand, whatever it takes. Like, just move your body, move your arms, make your face, like, get intense. And again, it sounds silly, but dude, it works. It works because you will feel on top of the world. And all of your naysaying friends and coworkers and parents or whoever, they're going to be like, oh, that's just positive mindset. It's like, no, it's not. It's changing my neurology around. It's changing my physiology around. Physiology leads to freedom. You change how you feel in that moment. And when you do that and you feel like at the peak of like existence, instead of just letting that be a moment you feel, what if instead you squeeze your finger and your thumb together? Or you squeeze your earlobe. Squeeze your right earlobe every time. Seems weird, just do it. So every time you feel the most peak affirmation state, squeeze your earlobe or squeeze your finger and thumb. And if you do that every time for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that's it. Guess what's going to happen? Later on, it's the next day and you don't feel that great. You fire it off and all of that affirmation and feeling will come back with it. And that's the whole key, is being able to grab that, harness it anytime you want, not just when you already feel good.
Now, can we also use it when we feel good? Like, will that enhance the anchor? If we have a major victory and we are in that actual state, like presently, do we fire it off then? And will that help at all? Or is that just...
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So there's 3 kinds of states you can use in NLP. One is a naturally occurring state. So if you ever find yourself just on top of the world just because you are, grab that same anchor, and that's basically, you're going to hit that and you're going to set that anchor. You're basically going to stack that state on top of it. So I'm a big fan of stacked states. I call it a champion state. So don't just always feel, it could be breakthrough and motivation, but it could also be like whenever you feel unstoppable, whenever you feel like on top of the world. But make sure that it's an action state. Like I feel so good, but ask yourself, is this a feeling that's so powerful but makes me want to do something? Because what you don't want, this is a little distinction. And it sounds weird because it's a very positive state, but you don't want to also anchor in states that have no movement but are very positive. Examples would be accomplishment. Think about accomplishment. You're already on top of the mountain that you hiked, right? I've been mountaineering for 20 years, and I'll tell you, like, the feeling of like I'm on top of the mountain. Yes, I made it. That feeling, as good as it feels, does not help me when I'm in the pit, when I'm on the saddle trying to do the last push. That feeling of accomplishment makes me want to sleep. You know what I mean? So accomplishment, what's another emotion that's similar to that? I got my goal. Any feeling around I got my goal, feeling fulfilled, feeling peaceful. Those feelings, as good as they are, those are ones you don't want to anchor, because that'll make you feel like, all right, I'm all finished. Nothing else to do. So you want to make sure you anchor feelings that are like, what's the feeling just before you get the goal? That's key. Determined, unstoppable, courageous, gotta do it, desire, passion, like things like that are the feelings that you want to anchor those. So whenever you feel those feelings coming in, that's what you want to do, and anchor those ones. Anytime you feel it naturally, anchor it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really important clarification too, because as you were taking me through that exercise, I started to think of accomplishment things. So now we take one step back. So with me, not to turn this into a personal therapy session, but
I'm here.
But I like to be open and honest with my audience. One of the things that I fear a lot of times is untapped potential. And I'm always fearful of being that guy that everybody's like, man, you've got great energy, but then never really being able to capitalize on that and like monetizing the podcast and making this a full-time career and getting out and speaking and being able to break through in those areas. I'm always like, I just don't want to be that guy that just gets close. I want to be the guy that does it. And I've done that in other areas of my life. Like when I formed my boot camp in my hometown, I had so many people doubting me because I was this 327-pound guy. And then I lose all that weight. I started inspiring other people, and I was able to help my hometown lose 35,000 pounds. So really the anchor...
So incredible, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, I'm really proud of that. So maybe the anchor is just gaining traction, that initial moment when I start feeling like people they are listening to me and we're gaining momentum. So would that be your suggestion?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's interesting, right? I'm glad we're talking about this. What a nuance, right? What a little detail. But that changes everything. So many people, it's like, what do I want to anchor? What do I want to like remember? And they want to remember the end result. You don't want to remember the end result. You want to remember the about to get the end result. So when you looked around, like not the 35,000 pounds, when you looked around your hometown, was there a weight, by the way, when you first started adding it up and you weren't done yet, but you were just adding it up and you started realizing, wait a minute, there's been a lot of weight shed in this town. Like, did you first add it up and you saw 8,000 pounds or 600 or was
the
it
first
1,000?
The first 1,000 pounds. So it only took me a couple of boot camps to hit 1,000 pounds because we had people just really, it caught on quickly. But I remember when we hit 1,000 pounds, I had hats made that said 1,000 pounds club or whatever. And these hats are float. I had 13 of them made. And that's all the money.
Wow.
That's all the money that I had to buy hats. So there are 13,000 pound club hats floating around somewhere. But yeah, I remember that exact moment where I was like, okay, this is actually happening. I'm making an impact.
So the state you want to anchor is probably when you're making the 1,000-pound hats. Yeah. When you know what I mean? Like you made those and you came out and said, okay, here's your 1,000-pound hats. Like we're doing this. And it feels smaller than maybe the 1,000,000-pound and where you are now with what you want to accomplish. But the neat thing is emotional states, they don't discern and understand the difference between context and between content. Let me give you a completely different example that I think is so useful, and you can use this with all of your boot camp people and everyone in your programs. So confidence is a state that is so useful. If you have total confidence, you will approach and try virtually anything, right? And you forget about, you don't have to work through fear and storyline and anything. If you feel totally confident for a new exercise or a new endeavor, starting a business or whatever it is, and what you said was speaking and monetizing the podcast and really going to that next level. If you felt total confidence, you would just do it in a heartbeat, right? You wouldn't even wait. So what happens is I'll ask someone, do you remember a time you felt really confident, right? And what they'll do in their mind is they'll try to think of a similar context time when they felt confident. So if it's starting a business, they're going to go, okay, when did I try to start a business and I feel really confident in business? And they'll go, sometimes they have no confident anchors in business anywhere in life.
Right.
So I got to remind them that states don't differentiate between context. So I'll say, when was a time in your life you felt confident? And they're like, I don't know. I never feel confident. But they're always trying to think of times I talked to a girl, times I did a business, times I made sales. And oh, no, I never felt confident. I said, can you tie your shoes? How confident I'm serious. How confident are you that you can tie your shoes every time? And the facial change that comes over someone, they go, yeah, obviously I can tie my shoes. That's a feeling of confidence. That's the face of confidence. Well, yeah, of course I can do this. 1,000,000 pounds, no problem. 10 million, no problem. Tie my shoes, no problem. So you actually go back to when you're 5 years old and you go back to the time when you're like, oh yeah, I got this. And then you go inside and just imagine how easy it is to tie your shoes. Psh, please. And that's the feeling. And then you anchor that feeling of confidence in shoe tying. And what you can do is it's called cross-contextualization. It's a fancy word for saying you bring a state from one place in life to a completely different kind of place in life. So you bring the confidence in shoe tying and you bring it across to starting the next leg of your business, right? You bring the determination and breakthrough from figuring out that Play-Doh sculpture, and you did it, at 7 years old, and you bring that across to losing the weight or showing up in the gym. Make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's simple, but again, it's not usually how we think. We always think in terms of the context and life that we're in and struggling for resources. But Milton Erickson, one of my favorite, he was a hypnotherapist and a psychiatrist, really like the father of change all through the 20th century. He used to say that we have a warehouse of resources full in our unconscious minds. And we do. And that's one of them. Every one of us has in our warehouse of resources, the resource of confidence. But the problem is, he said, we're looking at it with a tiny pen light. Like we're trying to shine in the little corner of going to the gym and saying, where do I have confidence? Oh, I can't find it. But our job with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is to turn on the floodlights. That's my floodlight sound, and allow illumination of the entire warehouse. So we can look and say, okay, I need confidence here. Where else have I stored it? And we look all the way around and go, shoe tying, there I go. And boom, you do it there. Another example would be, say, ADD, and you can't focus. The kid can't focus. Kid can't focus. Mom says, take him to a therapist. They can't focus. They have so much problem. Look, I got ADD. It's great. I don't call it ADD. I call it ADA, attention deficit asset.
Nice.
Because it's a powerful asset. But if I need to focus in life, you got to shine the flashlight somewhere, right? So if you turn on the floodlights and that kid, have you ever seen a kid with ADD who can't focus in math class? Sure, everyone has. But have you ever seen that kid focus? put him on Xbox and he won't change the game. He'll play for 12 hours straight and forget to eat.
Yeah.
He might even forget to pee. So can they focus? Absolutely. But it's grabbing focus from one area in life, like video games, and bringing it across to the area like school where they don't apply it. So it's not saying the kid's broken and we don't know what we're doing and he can't focus. No, he can. It's about getting people, and that's what NLP really is getting us in touch with resources that we're not in touch with and bringing it to the right area in life.
Yeah, it's like we're mining inside of our brain for like you said, those resources that we can pull across, and the answers are right there. We just have to tap into them. Oh, man, this is fascinating. Now, one other question that popped up that I want some expert clarification on with our anchor. So the finger and the thumb. Can we use that across the board as the ignition switch, or do we need a new physical anchor or action step for each emotion or thing that we're trying to bring about?
Great question. So I would say it this way. If the emotions are similar in nature, like powerful, courageous, determined, unstoppable, stack those all on one finger and thumb. Okay. But if you have something different, like they feel different. So if you have peaceful, grateful, clear, relaxed, maybe you need that to get out of stress. I would anchor that on a different finger and thumb, like your middle finger and your thumb.
Okay.
Or your pinky if you prefer the gratitude thing, one of those deals. And then I do another one. So I have anchors all over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 8 of them, whatever. You can anchor your earlobes, your nose, other parts. I don't know. It's up to you, but you can do whatever you want. Excuse me. So I have anchors with my wife. Where let's just say I'm down, like I'm in the basement office right now in my house in Michigan. That's my podcast recording place. And let's say I'm doing sales calls and I had some frustrations and I'm like, man, or, whatever, right? And I'm feeling down and I feel I'm not excited. I don't want to walk up the stairs and bring that with me to the house. So once I get to the basement stairs, I'm going to fire off an anchor of joy, playful, and loving. So now I bring with me into the house, I want to be loving, I want to be joyful, I want to be playful. So I could bring that, that's actually my son's anchors, joy, loving, and playful, right? Compassionate. But then he's 7 years old, so I want to be compassionate so I understand him. I want to be joyful, playful, I want to be a fun dad, loving. And then with my wife, when maybe, we're going to, have some time alone together, it might be more playful, passionate, and loving. And that's a little bit different, isn't it? So you can anchor different types of states in different places. So that's what I call a champion state, is stacking similar yet different states in the same place and then do a different champion state with a different finger or earlobe.
Amazing. That's so, this is
it's life-changing, man.
Yeah. I mean,
it was for me.
The resources are there. We just have to tap into it. So, man. Now, Matt, I know that we're running short on the hour here. I want to make sure that people, I guarantee that people are like, okay, this was the appetizer. I'm very interested. I want more. What are the best ways? I know you have 1,000,001 resources. So what's the best place to start with you?
Probably the best place is also to listen to the podcast. I'm going to have you on soon as well. So I have a podcast called The Purpose Driven Entrepreneur, and I do 2 episodes a week. Episode on Fridays, always Interview Fridays, where I grab an entrepreneur that's accomplishing something in life and doing something, and we get into their origin story and their why, their motivation behind it, and how they're doing it. And then on Tuesdays, I do Teaching Tuesdays, and that's usually a 15, 20-minute episode where it's just me teaching on something. It's like the 3 keys to something. Last week, I think I did the 5 hacks to overcome procrastination and take back control. The week before, I did overwhelm and how to get out from under it. So I'll always do things like that. So I've done travel hacks if you're an entrepreneur traveling, because I travel all the time. I'm on planes constantly, so whether it's traveling plane hacks, my 5 hotel hacks, my 5 home hacks for travel. So I always do things like that. It's a lot of fun. But if you go back through, the archives are always free. There's no paywall. It's on, so it's Purpose Driven Entrepreneur on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart. If you're in Chicago, you can hear it on 102.3 FM or 1530 AM. Just got syndicated there, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
But thank you. Every Tuesday, though, there's always a Teaching Tuesday where I teach some element of taking back control of some area in life. And although it's called the Purpose Driven Entrepreneur, it should be the Purpose Driven Human, because we always talk about things that apply to everyone.
Yeah.
And you can find that by searching my name, or, if it's in your show notes or however we do that, just search my name on iTunes and you'll find me.
We will link it up for sure. Now, I like to leave my audience in action. All right. I feel like we bring a lot of inspiring people on and they listen to podcasts and we get inspired, but I don't want to just be entertaining. I want it to be applicable so people can get a real impact out of it. That's why I do this show, for impact. So let's say there's somebody out there listening and they are just feeling a little bit hopeless. Like they are feeling beat up by the process of trying to get healthy, and they have that little spark of hope. Like they feel like they are ready to start taking action. What's one tip, one little piece of advice just to take that person that's basically scared to death to get outside their comfort zone, but they know they need to, and now they're ready? What do they need to, like within the next 24 hours, what can that person do?
The first thing to do is take back control of your mind and say, if I really, really want to get out and do this, how do I feel about it? Am I scared? Am I excited? And sometimes you got to go forward with the fear. You got to dance with the fear. And there's an old saying that goes like this, ships are safest in the harbor. But that's not what ships were built for. And the waves can be really terrorizing, and the ocean can be scary when we get out and say, I'm going to do this new life. But the truth is, the very thing that will fill you and give you purpose and give you passion and give you desire in life is the ocean, is the waves, metaphorically. You got to get out and start doing something. And the neat thing is, it's the rule of 3. When you get out and start doing something new, whether it's going to the gym for the first time in 35 years, or it's going to the grocery store and trying to figure out what kale looks like, it doesn't matter what it is. When you start something new, 3 reference points for mastery. And I say this with students who take our NLP courses, and it's like the first time you try a new technique, the first time it'll feel uncomfortable and weird and you'll feel like you suck at it. And that's okay. The first time you go back to the gym and forever, you're going to feel like you suck. The second time, you'll feel familiar. It's shocking. People think it'll take a month to feel familiar. It doesn't. It takes the second time. Time number 2, you feel familiar, but still a little bit uncertain. Time number 3, you'll feel like you've mastered it. You already feel like, okay, I got this. It's shocking how fast we can get familiar with a new concept, but all we have to do is get out and start it. There's no time like the present, and the truth is, your health is up to someone. And if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? So I'll leave you with that. Get moving and get your ship out on the ocean.
Yep, the perfect time to start is now. That's what I always say.
Amen.
Well, Matt, man, I appreciate you. I had high expectations. I didn't want to say that at the beginning. That's like the kiss of death. Oh, well, that's high expectations. But I did, and I knew what you're capable of. I've dug in deep with all your online resources, so I was really psyched about this one, and you definitely over-delivered. I'm just so thankful that you were able to add some of that mojo that you always bring to my Million Pound Mission, and now you're a part of it. So as somebody will listen to this, they will get some inspiration out of it. They go on the website, they donate their weight loss. Again, there's no paywall of that. We add to the Million Pound Mission. You're a part of that. So I can't wait to email you one day and be like, hey, dude, we just hit it, and now we're going to the next level. So
come on.
Yeah, I look forward to that day, my friend.
I'm so grateful for the time. Thanks so much again for having me on, Adam. It was a blast. I love just getting into it and just talking with you. So thanks so much.
You are very welcome. All right, everybody, you've been inspired. You've got your action step. Now it's time to get out there and own it every meal, every workout, every day. I will see you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for hanging out after the show for a minute to chat. I hope you enjoyed that. In fact, I know you enjoyed that one. Matt rocked it. Make sure you check out all his stuff. All the links are in the show notes. Check out his podcast. It's really, really good. All right. So speaking of the show notes, like I said before the show, if you want to connect and do a free 15-minute video chat coaching session with me, I would love to connect with you. Those spots are going to fill up relatively quickly, I hope. And I would love for you to be one of the people that snags one of those. So just go to the show notes and click on the link for the free 15-minute coaching session. Let's get connected, and let's see if we can help you get better results and achieve those goals in 2019. Looking forward to connecting. See you soon.